The energy from both Virginia Madsen and Tony Todd, combined with the tension between them and the film's soft, often dreamy lighting, for me has always made the 1992 film Candyman ooze thick sensuality. Sensual is an adjective meaning pertaining to, inclined to, or preoccupied with the gratification of the senses or appetites. Carnal, fleshy. It is a pretty word connected to our sometimes ugly base instincts. It is bodily rather than cerebral. My grandmother was a professional cook, and all my life she lectured on the importance of how food looks. It must be plated correctly for maximum appeal. This is because, although the word appetite is largely associated with one sense and bodily motivation in our day-to-day lives, taste and hunger, appetite can take many forms. Chefs of the world know that appealing to visual appetite is just as important as taste. Filmmakers are experts in visual appetites. While many slasher films use disgusting imagery and dark, disorienting settings, Candyman leans into an aesthetic meant to be visually interesting and beautiful. Many scenes in the film are lit romantically with diffused lighting that highlights Virginia Madsen's classic beauty. The use of graffiti throughout the film also adds an additional treat for the visual interest of viewers, turning even the most unassuming places into artistic galleries. The film's animal mascot, bees, are the perfect symbol to represent its sensuality. Their presence connects to so many of our senses and appetites, from the steady buzz that tickles your ear to the disgusting yet provocative way they crawl over each other when in a group, sharing the same space, giving off the impression of a writhing mass, to their bold black and yellow color that attracts our eye on a spring morning, to their crawling feet and fuzzy bodies that create a shiver up our spine when they move across our skin. And finally, to the taste of their sweet honey, which connects both to survival instinct and sexual desire. The sugary substance has a taste our body craves for survival, and its sticky sweetness is often connected to carnal pleasures in sex sales advertisement and colloquial language. Our main mistress, Helen, may be an intelligent academic in pursuit of a higher, more analytical understanding of urban legends, but it becomes clear throughout the film that she is more controlled by her body's base appetites than by her scholarly thought. We are introduced to Helen with a close-up of her face as she takes a drag from a cigarette. This shot introduces a theme of oral appetites. People who smoke begin to develop an oral fixation or a persistent need for oral stimulation. This means they feel a strong need to have something in their mouth. Brad Pitt has become a common example of this because he is seen eating frequently in his films. Helen's smoking habit is our first hint that she lacks control over her body's appetites. Helen's friend and colleague Bernadette also smokes, but it is in a more casual and social way. This contrasts with Helen's habit, which is closer to chain smoking. However, smoking isn't the only place we see a theme of oral appetite in Candyman. When Helen explores the apartment where Candyman is said to have murdered a woman, she steps through a hole in the wall that has been painted like Candyman's open mouth. At the base of this hole, Helen discovers candy with razor blades in them laying on the floor. The razor blade candy alludes to an urban legend in which the sometimes uncontrollable appetite children have for sweets is exploited by a madman who puts dangerous objects such as blades and poison inside the candy he passes out on Halloween night. Helen walking through the illustrated mouth of Candyman symbolizes his desire to devour her. Devour has two implications. Firstly, it stands for his desire to remove Helen from her world and absorb her into his. Secondly, words such as devour and eat can be used as sexual innuendos. On the surface, many of Helen's motives throughout the film appear to be intellectual. She is on a mission to do whatever it takes to write a compelling book or dissertation that explores deep historical and cultural impacts of urban legends. However, she often reveals deeper motives behind her behavior that are less brainy and more instinctual. On their way to explore the notorious Cabrini Green housing projects, Bernadette attempts to pull out of the mission because of the danger this area will present to them. Helen motivates her to continue their plan by reminding Bernadette that this trip is the key to outperforming the male colleagues who talk down to them. Competition is a fundamental instinct, competition for resources, mates, territory. Yet Helen's need to explore Cabrini Green is not only motivated by a tendency towards competition, it is also driven by a lesser talked about appetite, an appetite for adrenaline and excitement. This is the same appetite that propels people to the biggest and fastest roller coaster and the most disturbing of horror movies. In their research, Helen and Bernadette discover that Cabrini Green housing projects were originally built where Helen lives now, but they were moved before opening because the city realized that there would be no barrier between the nice parts of the city and the projects. Cabrini Green was then moved to its current location, which has a highway and a train acting as a barrier between it and the rest of the city. Helen is a woman of the right side of the tracks. There is both a social and physical barrier meant to keep Cabrini Green forbidden to her. Nevertheless, Helen seems unable to resist her adrenaline appetite, compelling her to explore the forbidden and unknown. When Candyman comes for her in the parking deck, he tells her that he had to come and shed innocent blood because of her unwillingness to be satisfied with the stories of his existence. She gets pleasure despite the threats of pain from forcing her way into places she is not meant to be. Her need to place her body in the middle of action instead of regulating herself to scholarly studies becomes an obsession as the film goes on, leading to her unfortunate fate. The most prominent appetite in Candyman is that of forbidden sexual appetites. The film is based on a story written by Clive Barker called The Forbidden. Barker is known for his exploration of forbidden sexual appetites, especially in his film Hellraiser, which delves into both ferocious female sexuality and the connections between pain and pleasure. Barker himself is gay, a sexuality which has been labeled forbidden and taboo by dominant society throughout history. The first taboo sexual interest the audience is introduced to in Candyman is Helen's scummy husband's sexual interest in a freshman student. This interest violates several of the social conventions many of us hold. It is taboo for a professor to be interested in a student because of a power difference. It is taboo for a husband to cheat on his wife because it breaks the sanctity of marriage. And while more debated, many people find it taboo for a 37-year-old man to date an 18-year-old. Candyman's original story also involves forbidden sexual desires. He is a black man who was killed for loving a white woman. Often moments of horror in the film mirror moments of sexual pleasure. When Candyman takes Helen in the parking lot, her eyes roll back in her head, evocative of a face made during sexual pleasure. Later, when Candyman attacks Helen in her apartment, he stabs the back of her neck with his hook. This motion is reminiscent of someone pulling another in for a passionate kiss. In the same scene, Candyman kills Bernadette. The sounds of his exertion during the murder sound similar to someone having sex. At the end of the film, Helen comes back and murders her husband. During this scene, she lets out a series of short moans, and once again her head tilts back and eyes close in pleasure.